Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and today we're going to be looking at the best Oracle support build for patch 7.37e. And to start off, we take Clairvoyant Cure. This just amps up your healing. The other one amps up damage. Obviously, if we're going to be playing support, we're focusing on healing, not damage. So that's pretty straightforward. Easy one there. Nothing really else to say about that. Then when it comes to the starting items, we have two sets of tangos, and these are obviously going to be good for healing yourself, but also your allies, which you're a healing support. That's really what you do, not just with your abilities, but obviously with the items too. Then Blood Grenade. Pretty much every support starts with one of these, or for the most part, that's kind of where these items get used in, most situations, is early at rune fights and early kills in the game. Then a Mango, because you're going to be all about casting spells a lot, and that's really what your hero does, and that mana transitions into health. I mean, it translates into that with your abilities too, so it's important to have extra mana in the lane. Every support starts with a Sentry Ward, and then like I said in the Abaddon build video too, a lot of heroes these days are starting with Magic Stick early, both cores and supports, and then Iron Branch just to round it out because you want to use all your gold early, usually, for the most part. You could even forego this for maybe another Mango if you want, just depending on the game, but this is a pretty good starting item build for Oracle in almost every single game. Then early game, I just have Magic Wand and Arcane Boots, and obviously with the Arcane Boots, you can buy Ring of Basilius first to amp up your mana regen and your allies' mana regen, but you're going to be going for Arcane Boots every single time. You're pretty much never going to be going for the Tranquil Boots into this like Boots of Bearing. I mean, this is an optional item here in Situational that I do have as a possibility, but it's really not something you're going to be focusing on with this hero because you're not a right-click hero. This doesn't really benefit you very much in that sense. You're not a support that can also go in and like click people a little. That's not something you do really at all. And then you just really, really want your mana because that mana that you have, like I said with the Mango, translates into healing when you use your abilities. So having more mana is extremely good, and you're always going to be wanting these Arcane Boots pretty much every time. Plus, the fact that Arcane Boots ends up becoming Guardian Greaves is also very, very good as well. So these two early game items are pretty much what you're going to be going every game, and these are the only real early game quote-unquote items that you're going to be getting, because transitioning into core items, it's a little bit weird with this hero. It's not straightforward. So I do have 3 core items, and that's because these are the core items that you'd be going, barring any of these normal support items. We have Pavis, we have Aether Lens, we have Shard. You can get these items if you're not getting these items, but a lot of times you want to be going for Glimmer Cape first, and then Force Staff second. So you might just forego getting a lot of these items, maybe both of these items, and just Shard later, hopefully for free, or maybe buying it for yourself or getting it for the second Tormentor, whatever the case may be. A lot of times supports like this who don't have good farming capabilities like to get this for free, but you do want it. It is a pretty good shard. And so the reason why I'm mentioning that is because even though these are core, you might actually skip all these if it's just a better game for these items. And so how do you know that? Well, Pavis and Solar Crest are really good against physical damage, and they're good when you have, cores that want to just run in, get that attack speed, not be physically burst down. It's also good for you when you put it on yourself for that shield against physical damage. This is obviously against a lot of magic damage. So in most cases, most lineups that you're going to be playing against have a lot of physical and a lot of magic, like 50-50, but sometimes it's more magic than physical. Sometimes it's more physical than magic. And that's really what you want to be weighing your options there. If it's heavily magic on like the mid and the supports, you do want to be going for Glimmer Cape first, because maybe the carry is the only one that does physical damage. Well, then Pavis early on is not really going to be that big of a deal. So it is one of those things where you have to think about what you're going up against and whether you want to go these items. And then Aether Lens is really the thing that you can go when you feel like, okay, I don't really need another defensive item. Maybe I finished the Solar Crest, but this is really, really good where if I get my ultimate off, if I can get my spells off and, maintain that distance, I need that extra distance to live and survive and get all this stuff off, and then we can win the fights if I'm there and if I can cast everything. That's really what you want to be thinking about when getting Aether Lens. It's like, do I need this rather than these other items because I need that distance, I need that cast range, otherwise I get jumped on every single time and I'm going to die. And that's really the main consideration. Then we already talked about Shard, like I said. You'd prefer to get it for free, but if you have to buy it at some point, maybe you can if you're rich, but for the most part, hopefully you can get that for free. Then, like I said, general support items, you can get these every single game. I mean, if you just go for these items straight up, you're not gonna like be griefing necessarily. It's just some of these items might be better in certain situations. If you did buy the Pavis, then Solar Crest is going to be good to round that out. You might even rush that kind of pretty early before even getting another item. You can get Guardian Greaves super late, or you can even go mech pretty early if you want. I just don't always recommend that as like a core thing because it's pretty situational. Mech can be good in some games, but it's not always the best, and you might waste a lot of money going for this full Guardian Greaves, which is very expensive, but it might be better to have some kind of other defensive item or cast range. Then blink if you really need extra mobility because there's a lot of mobility on the enemy team, or you really need to stay really far back and you need to just wait, and then blink alt or something like that. That's really the consideration for blink. It's also a very good luxury item later. Then Aeon Disc, if you just, maybe you bought Glimmer Cape and Force Staff and Ghost Scepter and Pavis, and you just like, there's nothing you can do to survive. You just need something to survive. And late game, while, you know, people get more items, more lockdown, all this kind of stuff, more damage, sometimes Aeon Disc is what you're going to be needing in that later portion of the game to just survive, to get your ultimate off. Then Ags is a very super late game luxury item. If you can get it maybe from Roche, or if you can save enough money to get it, that can always be good and amp up your false promise. But again, very late luxury item. And then same thing with Octarine, super late luxury item. But if you're going to round this hero out in a 6-slotted way, you do want to be going for these two. Then finally, we have situational items. You have Holy Locket, which you can get, and this is a very good item on this hero. Don't get me wrong, and you're going to be buying, obviously, Wand every game. The problem is, this hero already heals so much, and that's even the same thing with Guardian Greaves, is like, healing necessarily isn't the problem on the hero. Like, you heal better than almost any hero in the game. The problem is staying alive, maybe giving some magic resistance, some distance for yourself with Force Staff, some extra shield and attack speed. Like, you want to be doing some other stuff other than just straight up healing, which you don't really need. If you can get the ultimate off on somebody and you can heal them with your abilities, they're going to survive. That's not really the problem. So that's why Holy Locket's not like a necessary item every single game, but it is good if you can afford to go it. If you feel like healing is all you really need to do this game, you don't need to worry about positioning as much. You can totally go for that. Yule's Scepter is kind of the opposite of that. It's similar to Aeon Disc in the sense of like, you bought Force Staff, you bought Glimmer, you bought all this mobility stuff, and you just still need something else. You can go for Yule's. Maybe, you know, you have this route, but you don't have any other way to, you know, stun people or interrupt anything. Or there's an Axe on the team, or there's a Legion Commander, or there's one of these heroes that like maybe an Ursa, where using them during a specific time when they have an alt going or something like that, it's really good in that specific game. You can be the one to buy that Yule's and obviously upgrade it into Wind Waker super late game. If no one else is going for it and you definitely need it, you can do that. It's just not every game. This is just a damage item. You can totally go on this hero if you're like doing damage. I mean, that's kind of like absurd. Same thing with this. Like if you bought the Ghost Scepter and you really need it, you can always upgrade it to this for damage later. You can even get the Lincoln Sphere, which is obviously more of a core item. But if someone needs this Lincoln's on a support to like protect yourself or someone else, you can go that. It is definitely possible. Maybe you're getting dueled or doomed because they realize you're super important and they just want to take you out of the fight. That's possible to do. Although, you know, positioning might be more important in that specific scenario. Maybe you need more lockdown. You can go this super late. You know, these are all items to amp up magic damage or give you mana, all that kind of stuff. Lotus Orb is a good, you know, thing to get in different items or in different games where you're against more physical damage because of the armor, or you need to reflect stuff. You know, maybe you're going Solar Crest, maybe you just go right into Lotus Orb after that because you don't need this positioning stuff. You just need more dispel, you need more reflection, you need more armor and that kind of stuff. Then maybe that's what it is. You can upgrade your blink later if you did go for that with like overwhelming blink. You wouldn't really be getting the either the other two blinks aren't that great. I mean, the other Intelligence Blink is fine, but it's not the best. Like, you don't really have problems with that. So just getting tanky is something you could totally do. I mean, that's like a giga late game, like 80 minutes or something. Spirit Vessel, super situational. I don't know. It's just one of those things where you can get the charges and it does help your healing. But again, healing necessarily isn't the problem. Like, you can heal people through most things in most situations on this hero. So you don't necessarily need that. And then same thing, like I said, like with Boots of Travel, or I mean with Boots of Bearing, you're not going to be getting that very much because you're getting Arcane Boots almost every time. So it's, again, very situational, but you maybe can get it later in the game if you feel like you really need it. You could even have 2 sets of boots if you really wanted to. So those are the items for Oracle and the typical build. There is some consideration. It's basically just like, these are the luxury items that you could get if you don't want to get these super, you know, basic support items, but you can get these almost every game and not really go wrong with those. Then leveling is pretty straightforward. This really hasn't changed in a very long time. You're going to be getting Fortune's End first level. This is great for rooting people, first blooding at runes, or even harassing the enemy in the lane and having like a pseudo stun. Obviously it's a root, but it's great early on. Plus you're getting the next 2 levels in Purifying Flames. And this is great because this is a heal and damage, and you can cancel the heal, basically dispel that heal on the enemy if you're using it for damage, by quickly using Fortune's End to dispel them. So you can, like, you know, use this 2 or 3 times, then quickly use Fortune's End to dispel that, get rid of that heal, so it's not like you're griefing. Obviously, you need to make sure that you are in range, so you can use this a few times and then click this really quickly. So it is one of those things where you want to be careful not to grief, like I think I said in the guide, but still, that's why you want to be getting this first, and then leveling up Purifying Flames as quickly as possible. Level 4, we do want to get Fate's Edict. This is just good to have one level in both of these abilities, one for rooting for, you know, dispelling enemies and allies, and then this one is obviously good for disarming and good for magic resistance in certain situations, but it's not something you want really more than 1 point in, because having those extra levels in this ability doesn't really do much, but having one level is good. And then we're going to max out Purifying Flames, obviously get our ult whenever we can. Then we're going to max out Fate's Edict next, actually, because this is important to have up more than really this ability, because this ability, you know, the extra dispel and the root, that's not that big of a deal. Like the extra cooldown, it's like, okay, well, we're doing more damage, but you're dispelling regardless, you're rooting regardless, so you just have this up more. That's really not that good of a scaling thing in this, you know, ability, and because you're going to be using this one first, this one doesn't scale that well. So why would you really need to max this? Having 1 point is fine. You know, 100 damage versus 280, that's not a big deal. So then maxing this later and obviously getting your ult whenever you can. Then in terms of the talents, you're going to be going for the left talent. This one's really good for amping up the tankiness of whoever you are false promising. Now you might think Fortune's End duration is good, and it's not terrible, but it's really not that big of a deal. Like, this does not have much impact. 8 armor can be pretty significant armor, to be honest. So you're going to be getting that. Then Purifying Flames cooldown. This is great because you want to be spamming this as much as possible, and -1 second, if you look at that, that's 1.5 seconds. You can literally spam this constantly. It's insane. The amount of heal you get out from that when you get this talent is absolutely absurd. You can also do a significant amount of damage too right at the end if someone's low, and you can hit them with that like 5 times in a row in just a few seconds, which is really good. Then False Promise cooldown is great because obviously you're going to be using this as your main way to participate in fights. So having this be a low cooldown is really good. You can use it almost like twice in fights, to be honest, if the fight goes long enough and is spread out enough. So that's really good. But this is always going to be up for like every single fight, no matter what. There is no like, oh, Oracle has used ult, we can go now. That's almost not even really a consideration once this hero gets level 20 because you're going to have your ult pretty much every time. And then lastly, plus 1.5 second False Promise duration. That's great because this other one's really not that good. Like Fortune's End constantly dispels. I mean, that's kind of whatever, but it's not really that big of a deal. You'd rather just have this last a lot longer. 1.5 seconds can be the difference between living and dying. It can also be the difference between basically just being able to go in and not really care about what happens to you. The damage is really being reduced a ton, and that's great in general for the hero. So you see that that's really all about amping up your heal, amping up False Promise. That's really about the talents there. And so that's pretty straightforward. Like I said, this heroes build, this leveling is not really that big of a deal. Like, you're going to be doing the same thing pretty much every game. There's not much to consider there. The build in terms of items, there is something to consider, but if you go some of these normal support items, you're not going to really go wrong doing that, and then going these in very specific situations when you know you're against physical lineups or you need more range, that kind of stuff. So that is my Oracle build for patch 7.37e. As always, if you like the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.